Hereby, I open this academic ceremony in which Antoine Louis will defend the academic thesis entitled Machine Learning Solutions for Improving Access to Law. And I welcome everyone present here in this aula, and I also welcome everyone watching this ceremony online. Very good to have you. Dear candidates, may I invite you to present a summary of your study and the conclusions of your thesis.
Thank you. Dear Prorector, highly esteemed members of the committee, friends and family, thank you for your attendance today. In the next 15 minutes, I will present an overview of the research from my PhD thesis titled Machine Learning Solution for Improving Access to Law. Let me start by describing a reality. Every year, millions of people struggle with legal issues. Chances are some of you in the audience have probably faced such issues in the past. Tax issues, employment issues, debts, divorce, they are more common than we think. And they usually bring significant stress, as you know that if handled badly, those can sometimes have serious consequences on your life. That's what's particular with law. It applies to everyone, and everyone must obey its rules, but not everyone is able to navigate and understand it properly. So what do you do when faced with a legal issue? Simple. Just go to a lawyer. They know what to do. They have the expertise, and you can trust them. But this expertise has a price, and only the most fortunate of us can afford it. So what do the less fortunate do then? Well, this is the main issue. These people are left alone, vulnerable, unprotected, and sometimes even exploited because of their lack of knowledge about their rights and legal processes. Some may turn to the internet for answers, forums, blogs. They may find a handful of useful information outside all of the marketing tunnel out there, but they will have a hard time finding the precise and complete answers they are looking for. How could we provide these pieces of legal information for any question one might have? This is what my thesis explores. For the past 4 years, I've been investigating how machine learning, a domain in computer science focused with learning complex, multidimensional functions from data, can bridge the gap between people and the law and improve access to legal information. So where do we start? Finding law articles relevant to a question marks one of the first and most crucial steps in any legal aid process. So we want to start by exploring if modern information retrieval techniques, which are based on AI, can effectively find such information. For that, we need a dataset, both to train these AI models, that is to make them learn the task of retrieving relevant law articles, but also to evaluate their learning progress. I had the chance to partner with a non-profit organization who's also trying to make the law more accessible, and they do that by maintaining a website of commonly asked legal questions, with for each an answer drafted by one of their jurists, and the references to the article they used to draft these answers. Thanks to them, we were able to collect more than 1,100 pairs of question-relevant articles, but we also needed to collect the largest pool possible of law articles such that the AI model could be able to cover any legal topic. So we scraped official government websites and we collected more than 22,600 articles from 32 different Belgian legal codes. With this new data, we can train a specific AI model, which, under the hood, learn to convert text from queries and articles into numerical representations, so arrays of numbers. By simply comparing these representations, for example, by multiplying together the numbers at the same position in the array, which we call the dimension, and then summing everything up, we can get a score for a given query article pair. The higher the score, the higher the relevance. And then all we need to do to get the list of the most relevant article to a given question is to pass all the articles into the AI model, compute the scores for each pair, and then rank these scores from highest to lowest. Our results show that these AI models achieve much better performance than the traditional search technique that are based on keyword matching, which shows the potential of machine learning for the task that we are trying to solve. But that said, we must recognize that providing access to this article is not sufficient on its own, because non-legal experts may still struggle to understand and apply this article to their specific situation. Let's say I give you a list of 10 to 20 articles relevant to your question, some of them being up to several pages long, written in this formal legal jargon. Would you be able to catch and understand the specific parts that would help you? Eventually, what you want is a direct answer to your question, knowing that this answer is grounded in facts that you can verify yourself. So can AI do that? Can it provide you with a simple, long-form answer that references its sources? To explore this avenue, we once again need an appropriate dataset, one that links questions to high-quality answers and their legal sources. With the help of the non-profit organization we partner with, we were able to augment our previous dataset with such information. And we also took the opportunity to augment the pool of law articles to get an even higher diversity of legal topics to cover. With this new data, we can test the effectiveness of the so-called retrieval augmented generation approach, where a retrieval model first fetches a set of relevant articles before passing them to a generative model that looks at these articles and formulates a comprehensive answer based on what it deems relevant. You may have heard or experienced yourself that these generative models tend to hallucinate, which is the fact of inventing some information. That's why it's absolutely crucial to force the model to disclose the paragraph it used to draft its answer, so that we can interpret it and verify it to decide to trust or not the model's output. So, do this work? Well, not really. Our results show that when evaluated on automatic metrics, which measure some sort of overlap with the expert-written answers, the approach seems to perform okay. And we can understand that when we look at the generated answer. They are on topic and articulated in perfect French. However, when we have a closer look, we realize that these answers have many flaws. They fabricate facts, dates, sources, conditions. They add useless context, and they tend to repeat themselves. Besides, we notice that the model is not good at citing the legal sources relevant to the question. We explain this by two reasons. First, the generative model we tested are very small, so in a sense dumber than larger scale model like ChatGPT, which is hundreds of times larger than those. And on average, only half of the relevant article appear within the top 5 return result by the retriever, which is what we give the generator to draft its answer. So this means that the generator is facing the complex challenge of answering a question based on incomplete or partially irrelevant information. So we take a step back and we look at how we could improve the retrieval performance, as this could alleviate the bottleneck that we just described with retrieval augmented generation. So far, my research has mainly focused on one type of retrieval model, DPR, the one that I presented at the beginning of the presentation. But there are other models that are also very effective, from different matching families, each with their pros and cons, that provides their own internal representation of what is relevant and what is not. So the idea is to combine the result of these different models to benefit from the strengths of each and at the same time mitigate the respective weaknesses. This method, called fusion, has proven successful in the past, but was mostly restricted to English and combining no more than 2 systems. Here we explore its potential among a broader range of retrieval models, within the highly specialized field of law and in a non-English language. We consider 4 models and explore all possible combinations within 2 distinct scenarios. First, zero shot, where we assume that there is no domain-specific data available for specializing the models, which happens a lot in law, where data is scarce. And second, in-domain, where we assume we now have a limited amount of domain-specific data available for training. Our main findings reveal 2 things. First, when no data is available for training specifically on the domain, it is almost always better to combine the results of general models rather than to rely on only one of them. And this no matter the fusion technique we use. However, when we do have some data for training in domain, and we don't need much of them, the reverse happens, where except when carefully tuning the weights that we give to each model, performance actually decreases when we combine the result of various systems instead of using the single best one. And when we look at the individual performances of each model trained in domain, we observe that DPR, the approach we've been using since the beginning, is the most effective one. Yet, we're still far from the perfect score of 1, as you can see. So let's reiterate the question one last time. How can we boost retrieval performance even further? See, all the approach we tested so far assume that the articles to retrieve are independent from each other and complete in the information they describe. But the reality is different. The law consists of a complex network of interdependent rules that are carefully organized into codes, books, title, chapters, and so on. Each of these divisions covers a specific topic, where the deeper the division, the more specific the topic. The articles that appear at the very bottom of the structure take on their whole meaning only when considered at their rightful place, alongside the complementary information from the neighboring articles. With that in mind, we adapt the DPR model to account for this specificity. As a reminder, this model learns to accurately represent text from queries and articles into vectors that can then be compared to get the relevant scores. We make a slight modification compared to the original approach regarding the article encoder, such that this new version can compute representation for articles that are way longer and that would normally go over the maximum input size limits of these AI models. Now, at this step, the representation that we get for the article are based entirely on their content, as previously. But the idea is to take these representations and enrich them with the extra information encapsulated in the structure of flow. To do that, we use a specific type of AI model called the graph neural network that updates the article representation by incorporating some information from the neighboring articles and from the headings. Our results show that this graph-augmented model significantly improves over both keyword-based and DPR baselines. And besides, we find two interesting points. First, the choice of graph neural network has minimal impact on the final performance, which suggests that the mechanism of aggregating information from neighboring nodes is more important than the specific method of aggregation we use. And second, our results indicate that not only our model is better at getting the relevant article in the top 100, top 200, top 500, as seen in the table, but it's also better at placing these articles early in the list of return results. And with this final piece of my PhD research, I would now like to conclude my presentation by highlighting the main findings of my thesis and addressing its research question, which was to explore how machine learning could effectively be developed and evaluated to retrieve and present legal information to individuals with limited legal knowledge. So first and foremost, progress in the development and evaluation of such automated system can only happen with high-quality labeled datasets that accurately reflects the reality of the task. In our case, this means open-ended questions that use simple, common terms that mimic how non-experts formulate theirs. And then on top of that, human expert annotation to ensure alignment with how and what we want the AI model to learn. With such resources, we can train supervised learning model that associate a question with corresponding law articles based on a learned notion of relevance, which involves calculating similarity between numerical representation of text sequences, as we've seen. This model can further be improved by learning to enrich the representation of law article by considering the hierarchical structure of law and the information it contains. Additionally, combining the results of various retrieval models is beneficial when domain-specific training data is scarce. Finally, large language models offer the potential to provide direct answer based on relevant laws, but they remain susceptible to generating misleading information. So they should therefore be treated with caution for real-world uses, as non-experts may uncritically rely on this guidance and worsen their situation. And with that, I would like to once more thank you all for being here today, and I will give the word back to the prorector.
Thank you so much for your presentation. The opposition will be opened by Professor Kamperman Sanders, who is Professor of Intellectual Property Law at our university, and who is also the chair of the Assessment Committee.
Thank you very much, Mr. Prorector. Dear Mr. Candidate, you are to be complimented on writing a PhD thesis with such societal relevance. I really enjoyed reading on access to justice, which is, after all, an issue closely related to issues of accuracy of legal advice, completeness despite of complexity of concept and sources, all to the benefit of the lay person. I think this is a very important study. When reading your work, it made me wonder, however, whether legal concepts of access to justice also attract a certain weight in relation to your models. Access to legal aid, access to information. Can these legal concepts be used to underpin and define further what machine learning must be able to deliver for it to function appropriately as an instrument for unlocking legal information? As a member of the judiciary, I also note that outcomes of legal disputes are often dependent on the application of rules of procedure in a given case. And this means that, for example, the burden of proof may shift based on the facts and the pleadings on the day. I'm often perplexed to see that with the vision that I entered the courtroom, I leave with a completely different perception on what the legal outcome ought to be. Moreover, although statutory law, which you use primarily as a data set, is indeed supplemented by case law, and leading cases, in my experience, are often not representative of the most common problems. In fact, what is typified as a legal leading case is often an atypical situation. So how can, at the machine learning end, be dealt with these issues of legal complexity? And to wrap it up, would then also other ways of fusion or attributing weights or even use of polymathic Gen AI have to be used in order to arrive at even more comprehensive outputs? I would look forward to your reply.
Highly esteemed member of the committee, thank you very much for your nice word and for your question. I do understand from your question that not all legal questions can be answered on the basis only of statutory article from the legislation, and people might have more complicated or specific situation where only the statutes might not have a precise answer. I actually give an example about such question in my book about a tenant that would like to evict, the landlord that would like to evict the tenant because the tenant would make parties and have a lot of noise in the evenings. So there is indeed no, for example, specific noise threshold that is defined in the law at which you can evict your tenant, and you might rely in this situation more on case law. I think that was not the purpose of the dissertation. That said, I think that starting from statutory article retrieval can then lead to also potentially improve the retrieval of relevant cases. And this would be feasible because many of these court decisions actually cite the relevant part of legislation that apply to these cases. And so you would typically have a very detailed description of the facts, and then you would have the relevant provision that would apply, and you could you'd have extra information, which is the decision that was taken for this specific case. So I hold that by having systems that are actually very good and very precise at retrieving relevant legislation from a given description of a legal issue, this can, in a second step, lead to also retrieve relevant case law, because you would have the link between the question or the specific situation to the relevant articles, and then you could filter the case decision that would actually cite these relevant legislation. And people could then look into these decisions to have further context and further information about the decision they might want to take. I hope this answers your question.
Are you satisfied with the answer? In that case, the opposition will be continued by Professor Becks. Professor Becks is Professor of Innovation in Artificial Intelligence and Law at Utrecht University, and he is also a member of the Assessment Committee, and I would like to welcome him very much to Maastricht University today. Very good to have you. Please, you have the floor.
Thank you, and thank you, dear candidate, for the very nice thesis. I read your thesis thoroughly, and I liked it a lot. I liked the technical part of the thesis, but other members of the committee will also say much more about that. One of the things that I really did like is that you want solutions for improving access to law. What we see is that we have AI has changed the legal field, is changing the legal field. We have big companies, we have big law firms, big government, all trying to use and using AI and starting and increasing the use of AI. But maybe we can also employ AI for good. So for citizens, citizens that want to have access to the law, that want to make their lives better, and they need the law for that. So I commend you very much for that, for taking that perspective. And I hope that, I don't know, I hear you're working for a startup now. I hope that's also a startup that maybe doesn't go for the big money, but also goes for helping the little man. But we can talk about that later. So, as you may or may not know, my background is in good old-fashioned AI. So, logic, the logic of legal reasoning, applying the rules to the case at hand. And of course, there's very little logic. There's graph neural networks, so there's a little bit of structure here, but there's little logic in of course, a very modern approach such as yours, and many things like statutory or article retrieval, or of course, generation of answers in natural language. They need machine learning. We've tried with logic for many years, and sometimes it works a little bit, and also logic, I include things like regular expressions. We've tried that. It works very well on very bounded domains, but it doesn't work on natural language as nicely as your approach. However, I was wondering, because at some point there is a lot of, I do get the feeling there's a lot of correlations that you're trying to pick up on, and you're not actually, I mean, the models you build, they don't do legal reasoning. You talk about legal reasoning in chapter 5, where you say, we talk to legal experts, how do they, when they get a question, what do they do? Right, so they determine whether it's public law, private law, they go into subfields, and of course this is all very implicit, I guess, especially with senior legal experts. And then once they found the relevant article or articles that apply to the case, let's for now assume that we're only doing statutory reasoning and not maybe, as the previous opponent talked about, including different information. Once they found this information, these articles apply, then they simply apply them to the case. And I was wondering, well, would it not be possible to include, to maybe build in part, good old-fashioned AI system that does what your system does, your model does. So, for example, trying to find the elements of different legal articles, and once you've found them, simply apply logic, apply the articles saying, well, this is an example of, this case is an example of article, I don't know, 250. Let's just, once we know this, let's just apply article 250 and see where we end up and give the conclusion back to the citizen. Is that an option, do you think? And if not, why not? And would it bring us any benefits or not?
Highly esteemed member of the committee, thank you for your nice words and for your question. I believe that the main issue with the approach that you are suggesting, and I'm sure you're aware of it, is to cover a lot of cases with using logic and hard coding things, especially for a thing that is as complex as law. This is why my thesis took a very different approach with machine learning and learning from the data, which relies on the assumption that you start from the task that you want to solve, and that's why in my presentation I was talking about alignment and the importance of having these extremely high quality annotation in a domain where expertise is required. Because what you want to mimic then is to let the possibility to the machine learning model to learn what is there to learn, instead of trying to hard coding the cases, with the goal and the objective that by feeding in more data with a distribution of the data that reflects reality, this model will be able to learn new cases. And so it will alleviate this bottleneck that, in my opinion, we have with logic and these previous AI, well, this early AI system, which is that you cannot cover everything. And machine learning has proven in other fields that this makes possible to learn from data and then at inference time, to predict new cases that was not present in the training data. And so that's why I took this direction early on in the book. And what seems to give very promising results, but I do agree that further research, further work are needed to go a step further and potentially mimic how experts look for these relevant answers, as I described and as you cited in my thesis, with analyzing these different part of the books and then finding your path toward the relevant articles. So to summarize, I think that I took the approach of letting the learning be performed by the machine instead of trying to hard code all the possible scenarios that could happen in a field as complex as law.
Do I still have time for a follow-up question? Yes. Yeah, so I see your point, and I agree with you. On the other hand, the articles, they can be easily hard-coded. Probably, I don't know about Belgian law, but in Dutch law, a lot of relevant articles from the law have already been sort of hard-coded in machine-readable form, right? And these articles obviously don't change. They change, but they don't change a lot, right? So it's not like every week you're changing because a new article of law or something has changed. So what happens if you hard code these articles, but you use machine learning to try and find kind of the premises of your argument, right? Try to find in a natural language question, in a case, of course, finding what articles are applicable and which kind of, let's call them antecedents of the premises of the articles are relevant. That's something that machine learning can do very well. But maybe, well, what would happen if, for example, we have these articles hard-coded in logic, and not the cases, but these articles? Because what you would then have, I think, is one of the advantages of that is that your system actually does legal reasoning. Because now, well, maybe, so what are the disadvantages? What would be, for example, a disadvantage, I ask you, of a system that doesn't do legal reasoning, but that does large-scale data analysis on correlations?
Yeah. Well, yeah, I think you highly esteemed opponent. For your follow-up question. I think you pointed out a very interesting point, which is indeed something that I emphasize a lot in the limitation of the thesis, the interpretability also aspect of the machine learning model, and being able to understand what you call the reasoning of finding these relevant information. This is a drawback, this is a bottleneck of these purely information retrieval methods that is based on the semantic content of both the query and the article. I think that I understand a bit the system that you're trying to describe to me. I think that this would be possible, and this would be a potential other alternative to this purely information retrieval system of first doing it maybe in multiple steps and extracting information, relevant information or legal concepts from the article, and then potentially training machine learning solution which would do either also information retrieval, but instead of doing the retrieval purely on the content of the article, you would do it on the concept that have been extracted, and then you would be able to kind of construct this graph, which could serve as a basis of legal reasoning, because then you would lead to the task would be the same, the end result would be the article that you would retrieve, but then you will also have this whole path from the legal concept that would have been extracted, and you would potentially train other type of machine learning model also. I'm not convinced that information retrieval model would be the most appropriate. You would probably go to legal classification model, where you would try to classify what this query, to what legal concept this query correspond to. And you would have this path that would lead to the relevant article. This is indeed a potential viable option that I did not explore in my book.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. The opposition will now be continued by Professor Koster van Voorhout, who is Associate Professor in International Criminal Law and Human Rights at our university, and Professor of Social Legal Research at the Vrije Universiteit Amsterdam, and who is also a member of the Assessment Committee. Please.
Thank you so much, Pro-Rector, Dean, dear candidate. I would like to compliment you on your PhD. It was a joy to read. And I'd like to add that it isn't very often that one gets an illustration of a beautiful bridge in a PhD. Actually, one that reminded me, because I tend to cross a bridge, a blue one, here in Maastricht every time I go to work. And now you've updated on the slide, but the first one I saw was one of very happy people on one side, and a very boring book on the other, apparently representing people with questions and the law that lawyers study. Having made that joke, and all jokes aside, you've already started to talk about reasoning of machines, but I would like to dig into your reasoning a little bit more, please. As was said, my research assignment is to look at methods, and one question that I am still contemplating on after having read your interesting PhD is how you've inferred your research question from the problem statement. Now, you say quite clearly that you would like to answer a descriptive research question, although you also say, as you just did on your slide, that you'd like to evaluate the degree to which machine learning can bring such solutions. So moving from that more descriptive, how can machine learning help us, could you please answer a more normative question as to what is that supposed gap between people not understanding the law and those boring books of law that you shared with us today?
Highly esteemed member of the committee, thank you a lot for the compliments about my book and for your question, which I understand as the motivation of the research, what pushed me to
Would you like me to clarify a little bit more?
If possible,
Yeah,
I would
of
like
course.
to, yes.
So normally, of course, right, within research, you think of what the problem statement is, why it is relevant to conduct research, and then infer a research question from that problem statement. So what type of problem are you trying to solve with your more descriptive question? And because you're assuming or supposing a more normative question in that as well, that people are illiterate. In your chapters, you say democratization of access to law, ensuring that laypersons can get legal answers to questions, the need for legal empowerment, a legal literacy gap. But what is the specific problem, if you tie all of these elements together, that you wanted to focus on and also inferred your research question from? Does that help?
Yeah, a lot.
Yep.
Thank you. So I think the main issue and the whole motivation for my research was that it's not especially a lack of knowledge, even though I described it also and I give it as one of reason. The problem does not come from people especially, but more of the fact of the law not being easily accessible, even though being there. So I even mentioned it in the introductory chapter, in the motivation, that in a lot of modern countries, you have a huge digitalization of the law. And so technically the law is there, it's on the internet, but it's extremely difficult to get access to it, and by getting access, I mean to navigate it and understand it properly. And so this led to the problem of how then do we make it easier for people to get access or to navigate and understand it properly. And one solution would be to have people like the non-profit organization, for example, we partner with, that share advice to on the internet. But this is a very unscalable approach. And the whole point of using machine learning was to try a different route, which was much more scalable, and that could potentially cover any legal topic and be accessible at any time to anyone, and solve this original problem of the law being there, but not easily that people cannot easily navigate it and understand it.
Can I ask one follow-up question then? What would you say is remarkable in your PhD where you think I've now been able to provide an answer to someone having such a legal question that can then indeed be scaled so that it serves multiple people with the same type of problem?
So your question is about the efficacy of the model? Like,
or even more specific, an example that you think, having done this research, I would now be comfortable suggesting that for all these types of problems, one should use my research.
Yeah, so as we previously discussed, I think there are really different kind of complexity in a legal question that you could ask. And there are still a lot of limitation that I'm completely transparent with in my thesis about not only the models, the LLMs that answer them, but also the retrieval model, where if you look at the numbers, the best performance that we reached after all I presented today and all these further improvement that we did to build a better retrieval system is around 70%, 80% recall at 100, which for those of you who don't know means that getting it's a score that highlights how many relevant articles are present in the top 100 return results. So in practice, it means that if you have a score of 75%, you will miss out on 25% of the relevant article. And so to answer your question, I would not be confident in giving someone a solution that is missing out on 25% of the relevant article, because then you would have to answer a question based on incomplete information. And you will surely miss out, and as I described in the beginning of my presentation, legal issue comes with a lot of stress. You want to be certain that you answer it properly, and so I think that there is still some work in the future to do to reach ideally a near perfect retrieval performance, to be able to scale that and deploy that globally for the most vulnerable people to use that.
Thank you so much.
The opposition will now be continued by Professor Grabmaier, who is tenure-track assistant professor at the School of Computation, Information and Technology of the Technical University of Munich, and who is also a member of the assessment committee. And I also would like to welcome him very much to Maastricht University today. Very good to have you here with us. Please, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. My pleasure. Dear Dean, dear Mr. Prorector, thank you very much for having me. And dear candidate, thank you for this beautiful presentation and the wonderful PhD thesis, which I very much enjoyed to read. I have what I find particularly worthy of mentioning is that you have tackled a very hard problem, that is answering legal domain-specific questions with an intended audience of lay people, which at the same time needs to account for the full spectrum of legal complexity on the intake back end, if you will, and at the same time give accurate information in the most understandable, straightforward language towards the intended users, which is a very difficult problem to tackle. You've also taken on the additional challenge of doing this from statutes, which is from language that was not, let's put it mildly, not primarily intended for lay people to read, although that's the target, so to say. And also you've tackled this in a language that is not English, which is an additional challenge on top of the state of the art in the English-speaking AI world, which also points very clearly to the fact that AI and law has some way to go. Your results point clearly in that to the fact that there is a lot of work to be done in this area. Now, you've explored a number of different dimensions in the very numerous experiments that you've conducted, which includes insights on the role of pre-training on the retrieval end, different fusion strategies, the choice of model to begin with. And to me in particular, what I find very interesting is in the trade-offs that are sort of inherent in everything that we're doing, the compromise between the sort of idealized state of a manually annotated high-quality data set versus the much, dare I say, cheaper synthetic data set that nevertheless is available at much quicker and in much larger numbers, to the point of being potentially the better avenue to go. So, and I'm wondering, since your work, which is which is pioneering, and I have to add here that one of your papers has already become part of my assigned reading in my legal data science and informatics course. So thank you very much for your contribution also in that regard. The question that I have is, especially when I speak about those papers, what are the main takeaways that other communities and organizations can take from your work when it comes to developing citizen-facing RAG systems on law in languages other than English? As I said, you've covered a lot of different experience, but if an organization wants to develop a citizen-facing RAG system on primary legal documents, where do they best invest their resources, given all these different trade-offs that you touch on in your work?
Highly esteemed opponent, thanks a lot for the compliments, and I'm also extremely happy to hear that one of my papers is doing a useful part of one of your courses, so thanks a lot for that. The question that you ask is extremely interesting and overall extremely important. I have the chance also in my actual job to think a lot about what is worth investigating time and efforts in these retrieval augmented generation model. things are going crazy fast in the AI field, especially from the model side. It is extremely difficult to try to compete with the big AI labs or the big research groups on the architecture and the model and the compute for training from scratch such models. So I would argue to go invest more time into the data, which I find extremely important, and that's something that I emphasize a lot in my thesis. I did it also in my presentation. I think that it all starts from the data, and you told about synthetic data generation, which is also widely used nowadays for training such model. But I think that it is extremely difficult to get synthetic data that really reflects the reality of the task that you're trying to perform. And especially in very highly specialized domain like law and medicine, for example. In the medical domain, we have very similar challenges as the one that we have in the legal field. So I would advise to start from where I started, and I had a lot of chance to actually meet these non-profit organizations, because the whole research wouldn't have been possible without them. When I also emphasize it a lot in the thesis that these are of exceptional quality, and by that I mean that they have 6 jurists that have years of experience in answering in a very comprehensible way to layperson very complex legal situation. And this has extreme value for trying to reproduce this behavior with the help of machine learning. So to answer your question, I would put a lot of efforts and time into getting the proper data and potentially partnering with such kind of organization or companies. It could also be companies, but to focus on the data to have good performances on the task that you're trying to perform.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I do have follow-up questions if there's more time, but I can save them for the second round.
Thank you so much for now. Thank you. Now the opposition will be continued by Professor Scholtes, who is Professor of Text Mining at the Department of Advanced Computing Sciences at our Faculty of Science and Engineering here at our university, and who is also a member of the Assessment Committee.
Thank you, co-rector. Thank you, dear candidate, and congratulations on your impressive thesis. It's in that combination of data science and legal. And I've seen many work in the field of legal tech, but this is absolutely one of the most comprehensive works I've seen so far. So really my compliments. It's high quality work where I think your construction of data sets will be a lasting contribution to our field. And as you said before, it's very important to have good data. And that's what you really contributed to. Also your extensive testing, which is not a common field of practice in the law. I think extensive data testing is something that the way how you did it is something that you do not always see. And using the state-of-the-art algorithms is also really good and very hard, as you indicated, because the field moves very fast. REC, on the other hand, as you also indicated, is one of the few places where we can actually do something outside of what all the big tech companies do. And that's what you focused on. I also want to emphasize that the fact that you did this for the French language is a challenge that cannot be underestimated. As the other members of the committee also said, everything is English in this field. And doing it for French with the famous Camembert model is something where you really had a contribution. Now, I would like to focus a bit on your REC pipeline, as that's my field of expertise. And I actually want to talk a bit with you about the architecture, and then in particular the fact that you decided to use late fusion. which you are probably aware of, most certainly aware of, is very good for increasing the precision of a model. But it is also kind of causing probably less generalization compared to using early fusion, where you merge the information in an early phase, you got more vectors and you probably got a broader attention, which is of course also very important in the law. And then you also mention a lot in your thesis that you're chunking data and you're splitting it up and dealing with the context windows of these large language models. And that kind of gives you another problem. Most of these documents you're using are probably long documents. So why did you not use cross-attention there, which is better for long documents? And that brings me then to more like a philosophical contribution, also with what the other members of the committee already asked you. Did you also consider looking at like the recent progress in reinforcement learning, which would actually help you to take it a little bit further and move towards like modern methods for legal reasoning that are now getting more and more popular, especially the chain of thought prompting and the process reward models. So it's a lot of questions in one, but you can probably answer all of them.
Highly esteemed member of the committee, thanks a lot for the nice words and for your questions. I will start by the first one, which I understood as why the choice of late fusion technique instead of early fusion techniques. Which for the audience, the difference lies in that the late fusion, you will combine the results, the output of individual models together after the prediction, while with the early fusion, you would try to combine these, you will try to combine the representation, the latent, the inner representation of the model to then later make a prediction. So one will happen post-prediction and the other one will change how the predictive decision process is happening. So the idea of going into the late fusion route was also related to something that I said, that in the AI world things are going extremely fast, and we have seen that with LLM recently. But the thing with retrieval augmented generation is that that first part, retrieval, has also make people regain interest for information retrieval techniques, things that the field was not moving a lot until we reached the conclusion that retrieving relevant information would help significantly improve the performance and would reduce the hallucination of these LLMs. And so we've seen also a lot of progress into the retrieval field, which means that we have many models and many embedding models that are released every week. And the idea with exploring late fusion was to surf on this progress and to find ways of combining the strengths and also mitigating the weaknesses of these different models, knowing that these models will evolve over time extremely quickly. Whereas if you go into the early fusion route, then you will spend a lot of time building a complex system for a particular model that you chose like months before. But then you will have a new one the week after and the week after and the week after, and you might want to redo the same work again and again. So I found it better to start with late fusion, where we could fully exploit these very effective model and see how we could combine the output without changing the inner working of these models. So I hope this answers your first question. Regarding why not using cross-attention, so you mentioned that there is a bottleneck in what I've been doing, and I completely agree with you, is that, and especially in the early beginning of these neural retrieval model, they mainly all use a version of BERT. So as you highlighted in French, they funnily called it Camembert. And these models, they come with a predefined maximum input length. And initially it was extremely reduced, so it was fixed at 512 tokens, where a token is part of a word, so it's even less words, so 512 tokens is approximately 350 words. And as I mentioned in my thesis, even though the median average of the median length of articles in the data sets that I collected is around 84 words, you might have articles that are way longer than this. And so now you face the challenge of having to do something about this longer input. The easiest way of doing that is to truncate the input. Only take what can fit in the context window of this retrieval model, but then as you understand, you have a loss of information because maybe the relevant information that you was looking for was at the part of the article, but then you trunk it. Or you have other approach as the one that I explored in one of my chapter where I was chunking the different article and then passing each chunk into this AI model and computing an overall representation from each of this representation. Coming back to your question, because I'm extrapolating a bit, why not cross-attention? You might have seen that in the thesis, this joins the original goal of my dissertation, which is I've always started a new direction, a new research direction by thinking about people and eventually how we could deploy this. And these cross-attention model, even though, as you mentioned, they are very good at capturing the semantic relationship between a query and an article, they are extremely inefficient. They take way longer and demands way more resources than all the retrieval model that I explore in the thesis, which means that practically speaking, if you'd like to deploy such cross-encoder for people to use it, they might want, except if you have an extremely large pool of servers and GPUs at your disposal, which I guess you might not have if you are a non-profit organization who is trying to help vulnerable people. You would have to wait maybe a few minutes for having the relevant article to your question, which is unacceptable for any kind of automated system. And so with efficiency in mind, I found it a way better avenue to focus on these retrieval model where you can compute the representation of both the query and the article individually, and usually use a very efficient index structure where you store the representation of the article, and then at inference time you only have to pass the query into the model, which is extremely fast, and then you would have the relevance list extremely way quicker than with using cross-attention. And for the reinforcement learning part, I completely agree that this is an interesting avenue. I would say that the challenge for people that would explore this avenue as always would be the data. You would have to have experts, legal experts, that would go through these reasoning steps as we are going to these reasoning steps in these more recent model with their thinking mode, for example. You'd have to have this thinking mode written by experts. And also the thing with reinforcement learning is it works, but it works when you have a huge amount of data. And as you saw in my thesis, with all these efforts, we were able to collect only 1,500 questions. I would doubt that this kind of reinforcement learning algorithm would work with so little data.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Does that mean that you are indeed satisfied with the answer?
I can go on a little bit if that's okay, because oh, there we go. Lucky day.
Antoine Louis, the time appointed for defending your thesis has passed. The degree committee will now withdraw to discuss the quality of your thesis and the quality of your defense. And I request that you and your company, both here and online, await the results of our deliberations and our return here in this room.
The PhD defense has now ended. The degree committee will debate the candidate's performance behind closed doors. This process usually takes about 10 minutes.
in my rearview mirror, I know what it felt like. My goals only getting clearer, east side to the west side. No place like home, if it's questions that you've got, go the extra mile and die. On the line, I know you know that I can't read your mind. Years can't fly by now, don't waste all your time. Cause I'll go the extra mile. Long road to the south side, 10 miles in my rearview mirror, I know what it felt like. My goals only getting clearer, east side to the west side. No place like home, if it's questions that you've got, go the extra mile and die. On the dash, got my laces tied. Long road, I don't waste no time. Break rules because fate decides. With the team and we chase the light. I make a move, fall down, shake it off. I hate to lose, bad branch, break it off. No room for negativity, praise and love. Prepare for deep part cause we're taking off. Get the mileage, traveling so far from home. Gathering knowledge, other connections. I put the time in to get everything I ever hoped for. It's a challenge and we all in. It's a better future that we go for. And even though these nights seem long, I know that I am never on my own. Know you won the battle once you grow. South side, 10 miles in my rearview mirror, I know what it felt like. My goals only getting clearer, east side to the west side. No place like home, if it's questions that you've got, go the extra mile and die. Long road to the south side, 10 miles in my rearview mirror, I know what it felt like. My goals only getting clearer, east side to the west side. No place like home, if it's questions that you've got, go the extra mile and die. Years can't fly by now, don't waste all your time. Cause I'll go the extra mile.
Antoine Louis, the degree committee here present has assessed the quality of your thesis and the quality of your defense. In view of its positive verdict and taken into account your previous qualifications, the degree committee has decided to grant you the degree of doctor. Professor Van Dijk is authorized to confer upon you this academic distinction in accordance with Dutch university custom. And I now invite your supervisor to take the floor.
Do you promise to work in accordance with the principles of scientific integrity at all times, to be careful and honest, transparent, independent, and responsible?
Yes, I promise.
By the authority vested in us by law and in conformity with the decision of the committee here present, I hereby confer upon you, Antoine Louis, the degree of doctor and grant you all the rights attached by custom and law. As evidence of this, I now present you with the degree certificate signed by the rector, the secretary, and the other members of the committee, and affixed with the official seal of the university. Dear Dr. Louis, dear Antoine, we will soon be celebrating your accomplishment. And while we can and will look back on a great PhD dissertation and defense and romanticize your PhD trajectory, more about that in a minute, things haven't always gone easily. For instance, you started your PhD during the COVID-19 lockdown. The lockdown was difficult for everyone, but particularly for a starting PhD student. You can't meet your colleagues at the office or the coffee machine, or even meet your supervisors in person. Only later I learned that you were much taller than I would expect you to be. It's completely irrelevant, but it's an interesting fact. You managed, perhaps helped a bit by Vagish, who became your buddy and even a co-author at the end. He's standing right behind you right now. During your job interview, online of course, because of the lockdown, you presented yourself really well, almost suspiciously perfect. You did everything according to the book. You were nicely dressed, you selected a nice background, you asked the right questions, and you followed up with us afterwards. It was so perfect that we wondered, we, Jerry and I, whether you actually read the book on the do's and don'ts on job applications. If we would have done the interviews nowadays, we would probably wonder whether you followed ChatGPT's suggestions on job interviews. When I started seeing you at the office, I got quite impressed with your work ethics. You were very efficient, for example, with teaching, because you also did teaching in addition to your research. Most PhD students, when they teach, they tend to over-prepare. They spend days preparing a handful of tutorials. You also prepared properly, but you still somehow managed to find at least 3 days a week to conduct your research while teaching. We would also regularly find you until 7 p.m. in the office, and I asked you about this at some point. I learned that it was not because you wanted to work until late, but it was because it allowed you to drive 130 kilometers an hour, the speed limit after 7 p.m. instead of 100 kilometers an hour, the speed limit before 7 p.m. What was also not easy was the topic of your research. This is quite essential in PhD research and research in general. I pitched you some topics which you systematically rejected because you were very adamant about doing something that actually helps individuals with little to no knowledge about the law. And my topics apparently weren't relevant enough. It showed your strong dedication and probably also a bit of your stubbornness. It set the tone of for your PhD research. You selected a topic, you explained it in your presentation, you looked for problems, translated them into machine learning problems, created data sets, because of course the data that you needed wasn't already available, so you had to do it yourself. You found original methods, you did the tasks, and applied them to the problem at hand. Your research results offer potential solutions for finding relevant legal information, and they contribute to both the field of computer science and the law. And that's not easy, as we saw today, because it opens you up for vulnerability, because you get questions from all sorts of directions and corners, and that doesn't always make it easy to answer those questions. But as I always say, good quality research also deserves good questions. Researchers learned about your innovations from your publications. We, and with we, I mean myself and Jerry Spanakis, your other supervisor, and by the way, I'm doing this laudatio also on behalf of Jerry. We learned about the innovations in your mini lectures. We started with weekly mini lectures and later switched to bi-weekly and later monthly mini lectures. And in those sessions, you presented your newest ideas and results. We saw beautiful workflows, graphs, as we also saw them today. And also very interesting terminology. I learned a lot about bi-encoders, cross-encoders, and hybrid retrieval, and many other terms that it takes too long to mention them here. The mini lectures were officially called supervision meetings, but they were mostly, especially after the first months, mostly about you explaining to your supervisors what's going on and what will be going on in your research. In fact, you're one of those PhDs who leave their supervisors a bit insecure. During your PhD and afterwards, now, for instance, I've wondered whether I was a good supervisor to you, as I felt I learned more from you than you have learned from me. And Jerry has the same feeling, although admittedly he posed the more intelligent questions than I did. Nevertheless, I think we can agree that the PhD brought you good things. Going to Canada was a big dream of yours, and your research stay in Montreal made that possible. I don't know whether there's a causal connection, but it even led to your office mate there, Hannes Westerman, coming to Maastricht to become your office mate here. And you even may have learned a few things here and there. For certain, you have learned a lot about the tax law differences between Belgium and the Netherlands. You can ask Antoine about that later during the drinks. But I also remember a point in time where you made a confession. You said something like, "Gijs, I think I was a bit naive. I thought the law was just a collection of law articles that start at Article 1 and end at Article 10,454. Like the law is a sort of a Santa Claus collection of wish lists of all the children in the world." It was this insight, clear for all first-year students, law students, but not to you, that led to one of your top publications. Leveraging the structures in the law actually turned out to be a highly original approach in the research. Now, this all might have sounded quite positive, but frankly, I am glad that you're done and that you have left us. There are stories about colleagues having played table tennis against you. You're quite a competitor. Yet, I can proudly say that I have never been defeated by Antoine in a table tennis match. That is because I never played Antoine in a table tennis match. And now that you've left us, a table tennis match is unlikely to happen, so I can maintain that prestigious status. One mystery, however, remains unsolved. Just how much can Antoine actually drink? You and Jerry had a cozy and memorable night at a conference, YACL 2023, where you tried to keep up drinking with the tech and alcohol titans from Amazon and Google, only to gracefully bow out and head back to your hotel room, and in hindsight, that might have been the smartest move of the evening, given Jerry's self-reported hangover the next day. But in all seriousness, you did well. Jerry and I are very happy with you as a PhD. You presented papers at AAA conferences like NeurIPS, ACL, and YACL. And for those who have no clue what I just said, like hotels, conferences have stars, and there are no conferences with more stars than Antoine published in. Not only did you publish in what are considered top outlets, you're leaving a real legacy. One of the committee members was already referring to your materials, your papers, being prescribed now to the future generation of students. Jerry and I often find ourselves saying to new PhD students, and some can testify to that because they're in the room here, you should check how Antoine did it, or in Antoine's project we did this and that. Many people at big natural language processing and legal conferences, legal tech conference, have been mentioning to us, your group is doing this excellent research on information retrieval. Sometimes you say, yes, we know, and other times we say, we feel the urge to reply, actually it's just one person, mostly. Fortunately, now your work is being continued by others, and some of which are here in the room. As a supervisor, I look at my supervisees as my children, not my biological, legal, or social children, but let me call them work children. And with you, Antoine, I wondered or worried whether you could really let your qualities go to waste by working for a big AI company so that it can generate even more revenue. You couldn't. You're currently working for a French startup that develops and uses AI in the legal domain and with lawyers. You have come full circle. Thank you, Antoine, and I say this also on behalf of Jerry. Thank you for this wonderful journey. It was a true delight to be part of, and I propose that we now celebrate this until at least 7 p.m. so you can drive home with 140 kilometers an hour.
Dear Dr. Louis, also on behalf of Maastricht University and its Faculty of Law, many congratulations on the degree you just acquired. I always say it's the highest degree we have available, and that's really true at this university. Congratulations to you, to your supervisors, and of course also to your family and friends, both present here in this aula, but also participating online in the ceremony. There is still one practical remark I have to make, which is that there will be a reception offered by the young doctor, as we say. Reception will take place in the inner courtyard of this building, very close by. And the request for everyone present here in the aula is to already go there, except for everyone sitting on the first row, because we will still do a special thing, which is to make a photo of the young doctor together with the paranims, together with the supervisors and the full committee, also including Dr. Krabmeijer, still present online here with us. Many thanks to you again, Dr. Krabmeijer, for participating in the ceremony. And at the reception, I'm also curious to see whether the Camembert model will be applied there. We will see that. With that, and many congratulations again to you. With that, I also officially close this academic ceremony. Heeft hij